Good evening, everyone, and welcome to my masterclass for June 2024. I love having my masterclasses because I feel that the more that we know, the more that is being taught, the less likely that you are to make mistakes when it comes to property investment. And especially in these times, I've got to say that New Zealand is going through some difficult times. I think that it's far worse than it was through COVID, absolutely. And we're seeing companies that are struggling. We're seeing companies that are clinging on. We're also seeing companies that are going under. Now, I'm not going to be depressing here, but it is a difficult time for a lot of business owners. Now, I'm an entrepreneur and I have multiple businesses with multiple partners. So yes, of course, it's also very tough for myself going forward as well. But we will come through it. And the thing that brings us all together tonight especially is property investment, which is my passion and my love, and it's been my love for so many years. The secret, let's go to the first thing. The secret to property investment is actually getting an investment property. I know it sounds very simple. Remember too that when you get involved in property investment and you start investing for yourself, it is a very lonely journey. It can be a very lonely journey. And the reason is that you are making a decision that you're going to be standing by for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, and you're going to get opinions from everyone. And I have a saying, you don't ask a butcher to fix your Ferrari. You don't speak to people who do not have something in place for themselves, that do not have their mortgages paid off, that don't actually have a plan for their future, about your future and your decisions for your future. So it can be quite lonely, but obviously it's also incredibly rewarding for so many New Zealanders. I'm going to repeat myself as I tend to do, and I come back to one of the things that for me is probably one of the most unpleasant realizations about New Zealand, and that is that we have more people in this country than most countries retiring with a mortgage, and that shouldn't happen. But for that not to happen, we've got to look at how you can fail in property and how we can mitigate the risks that's associated with it. Now, in other webinars, I've talked about some of the mistakes that you can make, which is the wrong financial structure, the wrong legal structure. But more importantly, as importantly, it's the wrong property. And there are 1 million properties out there, or hundreds of thousands out there for sale, and you don't know what's going to work for you. And it can be incredibly confusing. So in this webinar tonight, we're going to look at what constitutes good investment property. What is the sort of property that is going to suit you and your needs just as much? We're going to look at the main areas in New Zealand that we as a company focus on and do our due diligence on. We're going to be looking at the price of that property, the ceiling that you may need to go to. And it's very much about understanding that this is a business. And in any business, you've got to have your exit strategy. And part of your exit strategy is deciding what you need that investment property for. And I keep it really simple because one of the things that I say, if you only ever have one investment property in throughout your life, it should be doing at least one thing. And for that, we go back to the 70% of New Zealanders who are going to retire with their mortgage, is to get your mortgage paid off. Now, if that's the only thing that you achieve in the next 10 years, then that's a win. That's an absolute win. We hate banks. I hate banks. And we hate the fact that they're going to be making hundreds of thousands of dollars from you as you go through and you pay off your mortgage. And it doesn't matter how long, how much you pay. Most people, it's still going to take 20 or 30 years. And if you're in your 50s or your 60s, that's really, really depressing. So it's got to be the right property. But I come back to the fact that it is a business. It's not a do-it-yourselfer. And there are lots of horror stories. We had a client recently that came in to talk to us because they decided they needed expert help. Why? They saw a property they really liked, Gulf Harbour. Liked the property, didn't know who the developer was, but they liked the location and they liked the price, and they bought it. By the time it was finished, the developer had put down the company that did those developments, and so there was no recourse as to warranties, guarantees, and of course they've spent the last 2 to 3 years in litigation trying to make amends. So, there are the horror stories that are involved, and of course at the moment we are seeing that companies are struggling, developers are struggling, some developers, and that's why it's really important to be dealing with people like ourselves, like Propeller, who have the background and who know how these developers work, what their product is like, what they've built before, and what our clients are saying throughout the life of the property that they have. So we've got to use experts. And on that note, I'd like to introduce you to 3 of the experts that I've been dealing with, and we were just talking about how long we've known each other and how long I've been referring clients to their properties. So let me introduce you first of all, as they all come on. We've got in the top, I don't know if it's at right or left-hand corner, but Grayson Bell. I think it's been 18 years, hasn't it, Grayson, that we've been...
It's a really long time.
It has. Grayson and his father, very well-known developers in Hamilton. So it's going to be great. We're going to have a round table and we're going to be talking about the pros and cons of the right sort of property for you, what to look out for, and also where these experts see their particular area going in the next 5 years. So next, let me introduce you to Darren Brown. Darren's a regular on my podcasts and my webinars. And the reason is, once again, it's been over 10, 11 years, Darren, that we've been working together as well. And I haven't had, on the 240 clients of mine that have purchased your properties, just like Grayson, actually, we've never had a complaint. So, hi.
Thanks, Nikki, and thanks for having me on tonight.
Yep. You're our Auckland expert in this particular on this particular occasion. And of course, the newbie in the bunch, let me introduce you to Graham Odens from Christchurch. And we were saying it's probably been about 5 or 6 years that I've been recommending Graham's properties. And it's the same with the 3 men here tonight. I love their builds. I love their fixtures and fittings. I love what my clients have experienced throughout those builds. And of course, these are in the 3 areas, as I said, that we really believe are the areas that our clients should be involved in and be investing in. Auckland, Hamilton and Christchurch specifically. We have stock in Wellington. Yes, of course we do. But these are the areas that we know particularly well. And we have a very strong, there's strong indications, there's the history, and going forward on how that is going to, and the growth. So let's start at the top of the country with Auckland. And your specialty are apartments, Darren. Now, we've got houses, we've got townhouses, we've got apartments in Auckland. So where do you actually see Auckland heading, and where the trends are going to be, because of course for all of us we've got headlines that we see all the time and they are completely different and depending on what page you are in the paper or online. So if I was a newbie as far as investments concerned, I'd be quite bamboozled by who do you believe, what really is going on, and does history actually give us the clues?
Yeah, thanks, Nikki. So we develop in Auckland. We've been developing in Auckland for around 15 years or so now. We specialise in apartment developments. We've developed over 700 apartments through that period of time. We're currently working on a project called Chelsea Rise in Birkenhead on Auckland's North Shore. If we start at the top and say, why would you invest in Auckland? And that's a question that we get asked a lot. Now, we only develop in Auckland, and we do it for a reason. And Auckland is clearly New Zealand's largest city. It's New Zealand's international city. Studies show that around half the migrants or immigrants that come to New Zealand come into Auckland. So there is a huge demand for property there. And one of the things that we're seeing at the moment in the broader market is that we're still running at near record levels of migration. I think we're running at around 100,000 net migration currently. That was up to 130,000 a couple of months ago.
Do you see that? Sorry, with the headlines as well. They're saying, well, that's dwindling away, but I can't see it.
Let's put it in perspective, Nikki. I mean, historically, 30,000 or so migrants or net migration to New Zealand is about average. So we're running at 100,000 right now. That's a lot of people. And if we look at that, and this is not just in Auckland, but around the country, we've seen building consent numbers dropping like a stone. So we're already 30% down on the numbers last year. So at the same time, we've got record levels of migration into the country. We've also got building consent numbers that are dropping massively. So it's clear that there's going to be a shortage of property into the very near future. And so that's one of the reasons why, we're very strong, very bullish in Auckland. We're continuing full steam ahead on our development at the moment. And yeah, that's where we see the market. We see it very strong going forward.
Yeah, and I think Auckland particularly, we've seen a number of developers that have actually struggled, and this is something that's really important to us when I'm talking to the three of you developers as well. It's, where's your finance coming from? Are you funded? How are you going forward? And I think that if you don't understand the industry, if you're not in the industry, there are questions that you cannot ask that you will not get the answers to. Why do you think, Auckland particularly, that we're seeing developers struggling?
Well, it's probably not just in Auckland, Nikki. It's probably around the country, to be fair. Look, some developers are completely reliant on funding from the banks, from finance companies, private equity. So if that finance isn't there, if they can't make the sales, then things can go pretty poorly for them, unfortunately. So we're fortunate to have been in the development industry for, as I said, around 15 years. We're very well capitalised. We fund all of our pre-development costs ourselves, which is what we've been doing. And it puts us in a really good position to be able to keep pushing forward, keep designing the building, keep getting resource consents, keep doing all the work that you need to do to get ready to start building a development.
Yeah.
So which is what we've been doing.
It was I was over there on the weekend with a client that signed a sale and purchase for one of the apartments, and it was wonderful. It was great going up on the scaffolding and looking at that view. And I think I said to someone, it's a $10 million view for less than $1 million. And walking around Birkenhead in that village was just fantastic. But I think too for Auckland, Airbnb. I mean, I'm now starting to talk to my clients specifically in Auckland, not in Christchurch, not in Hamilton. Maybe I've got that wrong, but the demand for Airbnb and how the figures look for our clients, that is actually makes it incredibly attractive.
Well, we have a lot of tourists come to Auckland to start with anyway. Tends to be the gateway city, and whilst they might not spend weeks in Auckland, they generally come to Auckland to begin with, and then sort of go around the country from there. So there is a huge demand for Airbnbs in Auckland, huge, and you can see that through the COVID period there weren't a lot of new hotel rooms built or anything like that. So as tourism numbers have come back, as we've seen post-COVID, there's been a shortage of hotel rooms, which meant that people are looking at more Airbnb types accommodation options.
Yeah.
And there really hasn't been enough of those either. So that's why you're seeing really good pricing for Airbnb up in Auckland here.
And
I think
also
we're seeing similar in Hamilton too, to be fair.
Really, I was going to ask you that, because that's something I haven't really started to investigate. So let's go to Hamilton.
For completely different reasons to Auckland, really, because Hamilton's clearly not a tourist mecca. But we do have, as you mentioned before, the inland port. There's a new medical school proposed at the uni. A lot of our industrial areas are booming, so there's a huge amount of business travel coming through the city. And unfortunately, with government decisions and housing of people, a lot of the motels and hotels in Hamilton are full. So there isn't opportunity there, there is opportunity there to cater for that business and corporate market where they can't get accommodation at the moment. So we've got a number of clients that are getting, over double market rent in that short-term stays or Airbnb type space, simply because there isn't that accommodation option for those corporate clients. So again, corporate clients are a great tenant to have.
And of course, with your stock, and with your stock, predominantly it is you've got the semi-detached 3-bedroom, the same as having a freestanding house, but $100,000 cheaper.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great little property to have. Super low maintenance. They fit a wide variety of people in terms of resale. Retirees, first home buyers, for the investor to on sell to later. So they're a great little property. And you'll have no doubt seen in the media, Hamilton's New Zealand's fastest growing city. So, there's just massive growth here and massive demand, and so many little opportunities that just need to be thought out. Yeah,
I remember about 8-9 years ago recommending Hamilton to clients. My Auckland clients would say, "No, we don't want to go there." And I'm going, "Listen, it's not about where you want to live or your personal preferences. It's about where the money is. You got to follow the money." And I use the expression, the inland port was just a twinkle in everyone's eye when I started talking to clients about that.
Now it's growing by the week. It's huge.
I know, it's huge. So how many, because I think it was like 15,000 to build it and then 10,000 to maintain it. And the rentals, when you look at some of the rentals that we were quoting 3 or 4 years ago to where they are now.
They'll be double now. The demand for rent in Hamilton is huge. It's not uncommon to see 20, 30, 40 people more show up at rental viewings. The demand is just huge. So it's great as an investor because you do have that ability, as awful as it sounds, to pick and choose that right tenant for your property. So I think, there's certain advantages that have come through with some of that larger development we've seen across the city over the last few years. And again, I think Hamilton's gotten a lot closer to Auckland. That motorway now, it's an hour, Auckland traffic aside.
I've done it in 3/4 of an hour, I've got to say. But then again, I was a Bombay girl, so I knew the super highway really.
Yeah, and you've got the train links, and there's all sorts of different things there that have brought Hamilton a lot closer to Auckland than what it has been before. And as you mentioned before, with the type of properties that we're doing, which is typically that duplex housing, you can buy a relatively good-sized modern home on, in a great area for a fraction of the price, which can work quite well.
So a three bedroom house in around the areas that you're building, what would they?
We only build in areas that are desirable. There are suburbs that we won't buy in or won't touch. So, you know, in some of the most sought after areas of Hamilton, you know, you're talking sort of mid 800s to get into a 3-bed, 2-bath property, you know, give or take, you know, 20, 30 grand. But they are areas that have seen historic growth. They are massively sought after. They're getting, you know, and because we've built so many in these suburbs, we've got test cases where we can show you properties that someone bought for 350,000 7 years ago that's now worth 750,000.
Excuse me, some of those are my clients. What about the clients?
And some of them have bought more than one house off us as well.
They have, and they've done very, very well. We had a client that sold. When they purchased, I think their 2 Hamilton properties, they were in like the early mid to late 500s, and they sold both of them for about 1.3, 1.4, and they were houses that were your and so
Hamilton has seen phenomenal growth, and as I say, I think the key thing for investors to look at is, you can buy any property anywhere and you can look at it based on price. I encourage anyone to look at it purely based on location. You know, the location saying is there for a reason. And I think if people really drill down into their, you know, due diligence on a property, look at the market history, look at where the growth's been, look at where people want to live. You know, you're an investor and cash flow matters. But at the end of the day, you're going to be selling your property to someone. And that may be a first-home buyer, it may be a family, it may be a retiree, and you need to appeal to as many of those groups as possible. And again, all of those groups look for location, they look for school zones, they look for, you know, all of those types of things. And I think it's really important to keep that in mind, because ultimately your long-term money is in capital gain. It's not in what you're going to get out of the property each week.
No, and that's something, once again, that's a trap for young players. With interest rates as they are, that you're not going to get that. And yet you should not make decisions just based on what the interest rate is today, because, you know, this is long term. I've got a story regarding a client of ours that saw one of your properties. It was the duplex. It was the dual key, a 3-bedroom and a 2-bedroom that was attached, which, by the way, are becoming hugely popular. Can't get them in Hamilton anymore.
No, you can't, not anymore.
No, because of, and I keep on saying to my clients, unbelievable. And Graham will talk about this in a moment. But we had a client that went out, and you talk about price and you talk about, you know, once again, trap for young players. None of our clients have had any maintenance and repair issues with your stock. That they're built superbly. They look fantastic. And we had a client that decided that they were going to go online and look for something themselves, and they saw something that they believed was cheaper. And of course, this is one of the things that I say to my clients. It's not apples with apples. You don't know who the developer is. You don't know what his financial situation, you don't know what they've built before. You don't know what potential issues are going to come because there is no history. And no. I think you know the story as well, because they bought a property, and it was literally, I think, $50,000. It sounds a lot cheaper, but it wasn't, and it wasn't, because it was a completely different spec, which was going to attract a completely different tenant, but it cost them, I think, about $150,000 to make it into a state that people could live in. You know, stupid things like one coat of paint on the walls.
And I think that's the thing, you know, people have to do their due diligence on us as well. You know, we've been in business, 20, 25 years or whatever, purely building in Hamilton. And I've got no hesitation to give anyone the list of the properties we've built over that time. And, you know, provided privacy is all right, give them the clients' names. You know, literally our business is my dad and I and the contractors we work with, who predominantly solely work for us, or we're the large part of their business. So the team's been around for a long time. The quality's there, the guarantees are there. New Zealand is a small village, really, and to be frank, you can't piss people off. So I think it's not hard to do your research on us or any of us on here tonight and find out what we're like as people and how we operate our businesses, because that's, to be honest, just as important as the product you're buying.
No, it is, because you've got to have the faith that this investment's going to be around for a long time, and that the people that are working with you are behind what they're recommending. Like ourselves, we're behind it, and also for the building. But this is one thing, and I'm going to come to Graham now. Particularly. So when we're looking at Christchurch, and there's so much happening, and I'll let you talk about it. But it also means that people are, once again, they're looking at trying to compare apples with apples. And I find this incredibly frustrating, because if you put the specs together and you can see that this spec is woefully inadequate for your needs as a long-term investor, but also that the spec doesn't include so much that you're offering as a turnkey solution for your house and land and for your dual key. So let's talk about Christchurch.
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. I fully agree with Darren and Grayson. Like when Grayson said, you need to do your due diligence on the developer. I mean, we're lucky with Darren and Grayson. They've got wicked track history, and exactly what Grayson said. We'll give you a list of clients you can talk to. Go on to one of our sites. Talk to one of our subbies. I think the big issue, and what you alluded to right at the start, was you need to be able to compare apples with apples. And if you haven't been in the market, it's quite hard to do. So you can deal with spec. Then it comes to the developer. Is the developer trustworthy? Well, you don't really know. Best way to do it, as Grayson said, get a list of clients. Go on site, talk to their subbies. You'll actually get a feeling for what sort of developer they are, and to build that trust.
Well, it's a bit difficult for some of our clients, I've got to say, because they're not in the areas, and a lot of them don't even get to see their investment property throughout the life. And so that's why you come to us, basically.
Well, this is because, and it all comes down to, it's actually a team game, rental property. You need a team of professionals around you to make it work well, so that you get the right property. As Grayson said, location is the key thing. You've got the right professionals. You've got the right developer. They're not going to go bust. The job's not going to take too long. You've got the right finance and insurance people and the right rental side. Yeah. It is very much a team approach.
So let's look at Christchurch. So I started my business down in Christchurch 15 years ago, and it was a completely different landscape then to how it was even 5 years ago. I mean, it was quite stagnant for a while, wasn't it? And then it's just gone nuts. I mean, let's talk about the price of land, for instance.
The growth in the Canterbury region, especially around Christchurch, has been the biggest growth that it's actually seen in recorded history, especially if you look at the last 5 years. Where that growth goes, I do not see it going down. Land prices are significantly higher than they were 3-4 years ago. The demand is still there. The university is now looking at 30,000 students by the end of next year. That's another 9,000 up from where it is sitting now. The demand is way outweighing the supply at the moment. We are seeing some developers falling over, and this is why it comes back to the due diligence and what Darren said before, that there are some guys that haven't been in the market that long. They're requiring funding. They may not be paying their subbies. The build time may take long, may not get completed. So we're seeing that risk, and that's affecting the amount of homes that are coming out. So the guys that have been around for a while, we're actually putting out the homes, but the amount of homes is not meeting the demand at the moment.
And that goes against, doesn't it, some of the things that we're reading. It comes back to what I was saying, that it can be very confusing, and you've got to have the feet on the ground that are actually seeing this as well. Because, I mean, I historically or anecdotally, every time a tract of land in Christchurch and one of the developments comes out and it's online, the website crashes. I mean, it is difficult, isn't it, to find good pieces?
To get good pieces of land in areas that it's going to have good schooling, good amenities. That, as Darren and Grayson both mentioned, that you've got to be able to attract to first-time buyers, other investors, retirees, people trading down maybe. It's very hard to find those blocks to build on.
Do you think,
and they get snapped up.
I think that's something we're going to see nationwide too. Like if you look at some of the flood mapping data that's come out of Cyclone Gabriel last year, or some of the infrastructure issues that are coming out of Three Waters and whatever, there are huge parts of these cities, and I know Hamilton in particular, where you literally can't develop anymore because of some of these risks or infrastructure issues or what have you. So again, with land or developable land becoming more and more scarce, that's only going to send prices one way, because we all know the typical supply and demand model, and the supply side just isn't there at the moment, be it because of finance, because of any reason really. But these infrastructure things are going to be long-term issues, and they're going to put a long-term pressure on house prices going up. There's no other way about it.
Right, stuff in there. I think it's a really important point that you raised there, Grace. And you're talking about flood zones and areas where there's risk of flooding, and you're going to come to a situation very soon where these types of properties that are built in areas that are prone to flooding just won't be able to be insured. Now, if you can't insure a property, do you reckon you're going to be able to get a mortgage on it? Because no bank's going to give you a mortgage if they can't get insurance on that property. So you're going to get a whole bunch of properties around the country that exist right now that are prone to flooding, that you're not going to be able to get insurance on, and then you're not going to be able to get a mortgage on. Now, those properties aren't going to go up in value. They're actually going to go down in value over time. So when you talk, Nikki, about doing your due diligence properly, this is one example of an area where investors new to the game need to be really cognizant of. They need to understand things like this. And I know that you obviously do your due diligence on issues like this, but an investor that doesn't understand this side of things won't realize it, and until it's too late, really.
Yeah.
So
I come back to what I always say, which is you don't know what you don't know. So you've just opened up another door, and for new investors who are doing it by themselves, I'd be thinking, oh, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah,
and that's,
for example, up in Auckland here, the council has a GIS viewer, so it's basically a computer program that you can log onto the website and have a look, and you can see what areas are flood prone and which ones aren't. But look, I promise you 90% of people won't know that.
No.
So, this is just one area, but there are so many things that you need to be aware of when you're buying property, and make sure that you're not making some basic errors when you're buying that first property or two. And to do that, you either need to do a huge amount of research yourself, read heaps of books, just talk to a lot of people in the industry, and just really be around it for a long time, or you need to deal with number one, good developers with a proven track record, and also companies like Nikki's that can actually do that due diligence, for you.
Because I think that's a valid point too, Darren, is I've seen developers make those mistakes around flooding or infrastructure or land covenants or what have you. And they're in the business themselves, and I think that's where it is important to deal with people who are experienced, and people like Nikki who deal with that experience, that there is that history there, because there are a lot of people that are fly-by-nighters or don't fully do their own due diligence before buying that development land. So I think that's a really valid point.
And Christchurch, Graham.
We're currently dealing with 3 primary councils down here in Christchurch, one of which is really just put its hands in the air and said, well, we don't know how we're going to deal with stormwater and sewer. and building multiple dwellings on the site. So they've literally just put their hands in the air. And I've even seen them retrospectively going against developers and requiring the homes to be rebuilt. So this is because, and as Darren said, these developments were in lower lying areas where they knew that there was always going to be some sort of issue. Whereas a developer shouldn't be looking at that and looking at, well, no, we're not going to have issues with this area. So it's all about making sure that you navigate your way through the investment with the right professionals. It's a fully team approach.
Yeah.
Well, one of the probably the most important question that any new investor should be asking or ask themselves is, who is the developer? Because you're going to get multitude of developers out there, and what they build, how they build it, their professional integrity, their experience, the team that they have around them, all these things really come into play when you're looking at investment property.
Yeah.
And if you get any of those things wrong as a developer, then you're not going to be able to bring good quality product to the market. And if you bought from a developer like that, then you could run into problems.
Yeah.
And in fact, 2 days ago, there was a news article on the New Zealand Herald website, and a developer had taken deposits from a whole bunch of purchasers and had not only not done what he was meant to do, which was all these deposits are meant to be held in a solicitor's trust account.
All of our clients' deposits are held in solicitors' trust accounts.
That's the number one rule that every that you tell your clients. That's in the legal agreements that we have with all of our clients. The deposits are held in a solicitor's trust account and don't get touched until the development's complete, as it should be. But this developer had literally taken the deposits and gone and used that for all sorts of things. And so he couldn't complete the development, and these poor purchasers are left out of pocket, having paid this deposit and nothing to show for it.
Yeah.
And that kind of action, in my view, is just criminal, and it should not happen. But it is so important that we deal with, people deal with good quality developers that won't be doing things like that.
And you brought up another thing as well with the sale and purchase agreement. This is one of the things that we do. We look at all of the sale and purchase agreements that come from the various developers. Now, what was the big thing a few years ago? The sunset clause. And this is where developers, especially when the market was going nuts, where it was going up by 40% in Auckland, for instance, that they would take your deposit. Yes, it was held in a solicitor's trust account, but if it hadn't been built by a certain time, it was only the developer that could decide that they're going to cancel a contract and give you your deposit back. Now, that was so rife when these properties were now worth $150,000, $200,000 more than when not our client, but when clients purchased them, and that became a huge deal. And so, what we have always said is that it's the purchaser that can decide, if the property's not built by a certain time, to say, well, is it worth my while keeping on for this bill for the next 6 months because it's going up like this? Or it's flat and I might take my deposit and put it somewhere else. But, that was just one of the traps that a lot of people, and experienced people, and I know solicitors themselves, that fell into that trap and not realising exactly what that meant for them.
I think it's just part of good business ethics, really. Like, we've always had a sunset clause where it's purely for the purchaser's benefit, not our own. And I just think, again, like what I said before, New Zealand is a small village, really. And I think, dealing with ethical business people that are wanting that repeat business and understand that, business is built on people and relationships, not on a spreadsheet. And I think, that's critical.
It is, but I think you're being a bit naive. Sorry, Grace.
Probably.
Because it may be a village. Sorry, go on.
Sorry, Nick, I was just going to give an example as well. I mean, you look at some of these developments and you look on their website, and I've seen many of these, and you'll go through the website and you'll have no idea who the developer is. You'll look at every page and you'll see these beautiful pictures and you'll see all this sort of stuff, and it's been written by some flash marketing company, but you'll have no idea who is behind it. And I'm sure Graham and Grayson are the same. I mean, I am the easiest person in the world to find. We did a 10-year development at Sugar Tree with 700 apartments. And I had my personal mobile phone number on the website for every one of those 10 years. Anyone could contact me at any time. And, that goes to, who we are as a company, who I am as a person. And I'm sure these gentlemen are the same. But we have, developers hiding behind a flash website with no way of knowing who they are and how to contact them. I mean, that tells you something right from the start. So, yeah.
No, that's very true. I just looking at the three of you, and you've got different profiles of properties as well. And I get asked all the time, well, is it better to get an apartment? Is it better to get a freestanding house? Is it, these the 3-bedroom semi-detached houses? And, what do you think is going to be the best? And my view is, and I'll get your feedback on this as well, it comes down to what we need to achieve for the client. If we're going to hold these properties long enough, our cash flows don't show properties doubling for 12 years. So actually, if the price is, if it's built in the right way, it's in the right area, the price is right for the client, the rental return is right, and potentially they're going to get out of it in 10 or 12 years enough to pay off their mortgage, then I don't think that the profile of the property is that important. It's what that property's got to achieve for you. That is the most important thing. And obviously as well, bank criteria. But I think we've got to walk away from, is this better than this? Is this better than that? Because, a freestanding house down in Tokoroa is not going to be the same as an apartment in Auckland as far as growth is concerned, or a duplex in Christchurch, or a freestanding house in Christchurch, or a semi-detached in Hamilton. It's not the profile. It's not necessarily the profile of the property. It's a whole gamut of things that you've got to be looking for.
Yeah, look, every property, every type of property has its advantages and disadvantages, and locations are probably fairly similar, So all I can talk about is some of the advantages of buying apartments, and I'm sure Grayson and Graham will have advantages of their types of properties as well. But you're right, Nick, it is about what's right for that individual purchaser. And we find sometimes people are building a portfolio. Often they'll want one of each type of property in their portfolios, or they'll want, if they've got a house, a family home, maybe they'll want something a little bit different, an apartment, but what have you. But
Yeah.
Look, it just comes down to the individual investor and what's right for their particular situation.
Well, it's true, because when we hear, we'd like a freestanding house, and the client's got an income, has got a spending ability of $700,000, we know that they're not going to be able to get anything in Auckland. And yet Auckland, like Hamilton, like Christchurch, are the three major centres that we focus on. So we want you to be in Auckland as well as diversifying into other areas. And you're quite right. To have a variety of product in your portfolio in different locations is very healthy. You're spreading your risk. So no, I say to clients, no, you're not going to get a brand new house in Auckland for $700,000 or $800,000, but you will get a great house for that in either Hamilton or Christchurch with similar growth, because we've got the proof there. I mean, Christchurch, as we said, and you look at some of the areas in Christchurch, Graham, and just how they've exploded, that they weren't around 5 years ago. Rolleston.
Oh, yeah. Rolleston's gone through a massive growth, quite stable there for about 15, 18 years. And the last 5 years, it's pretty much almost doubled.
Yeah.
I think there's duplexes that are now kicking off in Ralston, which are going to be cut by the council, pretty much similar with Hamilton, with preventing that dual key on a site just because of stormwater and sewer capacity they've got out there. So I think dual key is going to come very hard to get in the near future in Selwyn, especially Ralston area.
Well, it was like that in Hamilton. We sold so many of dual key, didn't we, Grayson?
Yeah, huge number. Yeah, I think.
A huge
I
number.
think Grayson, I think we're about to hit exactly. Or we're going through, like we're selling a lot now, but I think we're going to get that rope cut.
Yeah,
And the value of those properties will only increase.
Oh, so they'll go through the roof.
yeah. But
Similarly, I mean, look, it's similar to even what we're doing in Hamilton now. You know, with this new Plan Change 12 that's coming through, with the the government changes and what have you that were announced a year or so back, you're going to see smaller and smaller homes built, and what we're building now is going to be highly desirable, like your dual keys are now. I think it's just the way that the property cycle is moving.
Yeah,
but I think, Nikki, to your point, probably a good reason to be dealing with people like yourself is that for an individual investor to do this amount of research and detail into each of these cities and find out all of these different advantages and nuances in each city and each different property would take, a massive amount of time.
well, that's
whereas you do have that information on hand for them.
Yeah, I mean, a developer's not going to tell someone off the street where they're getting their finance from. I know, because I ask and I get told. So that is very much part of our due diligence. But going back to the price point as well, one of the things I was going to circle back to was the fact that, yes, I want my clients, whilst they still can, to have property in the three major areas. And so when we look, Darren, at your apartments over in Birkenhead, for instance, an $800,000 property over there, and I know because we've done our calculations, the cost per square metre on your properties, and they're exceptional properties, are not as expensive as those around them without the views. But to find something like that at that price point with those sorts of views at that quality level, with being a boutique development, it's just how wide is that window going to be?
Well, if you're talking about the general market, I mean, interest rates have been high for a good couple of years now, and we've seen property prices sort of come back a bit across the country as a result, or generally across the country. What we're going to see shortly, though, is interest rates are going to start coming down. Now, there's debate as to whether that happens later on this year or whether it happens early next year or even mid next year. But everyone says and knows that these rates are going to come down. Now, when these interest rates come down, what we will see, and we know this from experience in the industry over many years, is that property prices will go up. And that will happen. There's no question. And that if that would be happening, even if we didn't have massive migration and a shortage of properties being built. So not only interest rates going to come back down, but you've also got high migration and lack of building. I mean, it doesn't take a genius to work out what's going to happen to prices. They are going to, once they start going up, they're going to go up quickly. And what we're telling our purchasers at the moment is that if you're going to get in, especially into the Auckland market, which has historically been quite challenging to do because it is a higher price point than the markets around the country, is that you want to get in when you can, and now is the time. One of the advantages that we talk to our purchasers about being an apartment development is that it actually takes longer to build, and some people might say, well, that sounds like a disadvantage.
No.
For some people it is, but for people that want to get that capital gain over a long period of time without actually having to put much money in, the longer it takes us to build a development, the better it is for you. Because you put down a 10% deposit only, and you put that down in today's market, and you don't have to settle or pay any more money for, say, 2.5 years. You've got 2.5 years worth of capital gain. for a 10% deposit.
Yeah.
You know, which you could, in some cases or in many cases, borrow against equity in your own home. So it costs you very little to get into about to be a very strong market, not just in Auckland, but around the country. You know, we're telling people right now, forget about what the media and the headline says and what have you. If you were ever going to buy property off the plan, now is the time to do it, because you're not going to find a better time with all the market parameters combining. And in this way, at this moment, this is the time. And you'll look back on this period of time, a year, 2 years, 5 years from now, and go, wow, that was such a great decision.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, that's concerning people right now.
So let's go round. We're running out of time, but let's have a bit of a prediction, and we won't hold you to it. We won't pull this out of the vaults in a few years and say, you idiot.
I'll go first. I don't mind.
Okay.
I'll go first. I reckon Chiefs by 7. Let's
Thanks for
face
that,
it.
Graham.
Let's face it. Like, you guys may be closer now with all your highways, but this is probably the closest all three of us are going to be as far as Super Rugby titles now that we're out of the final.
Auckland's due, I think.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. No, thank you. Well, whilst you're sharing all of this with us, how about your prediction for the next 5 years with in Christchurch? Let's be more specific. Properties that you're building now for what, 800? Let's just say.
Yeah, I think standalone under 800K, or if you get a pair of duplexes under 113, I think you're going to be in the money no matter what.
Yeah.
Just section prices, we're still like, they're not going to come down. The limited stormwater and sewer out Salwon Way, Rolleston prices are never going to be as cheap. The prices are going to go up. As Darren and Grayson both said, it comes down to picking your developer and getting the right location.
Yeah.
Yes, there are some cheaper ones out there, but I think they'll hit the fan. It's all about price point, location, and developer, and then that team approach.
Well, one of the things that I know, because I've worked with all three of you for a very long time now, is that it's not your margins are realistic, and there's not a lot of fat there. That's the other thing that I think that new investors or people that are buying properties just don't understand, that the margins just are squeezed and squeezed.
Yeah, I guess as with Darren and Grayson, I mean, the subbies I work with, I've been with for the last sort of like 10, 12 years. You grow relationships, you build relationships. When you build a property, you want to leave something in there for the next person and then the next person. But you want to be able to stand behind your job and go, damn, I'm proud of that house or that duplex or that development. As Darren said, he had his name on those units for 10 years, the 700 units. That's what I call a developer.
Yeah. No, and so, yep. So growth in, so me in my cash flows saying that the properties in Christchurch aren't going to double for 12 years. You think that's conservative?
That's really conservative. I mean,
thank you.
Crikey. I mean, we've got 700 homes shortfall just on the migration figure. We're currently about 800 homes short of our current demand. So that's 1,500 homes that we need a year that we can't provide. What that does, coupled with the interest rates and further migration, means prices are only going to increase.
Right.
I'd say conservative. I'd be sort of, and Christchurch is conservative, but I'd say 7 to 8 years.
Okay, thank you for that, Grayson. Your prediction for Hamilton.
I agree with Graham, and for large
Chiefs all the way.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
The testosterone.
Sorry, Darren.
Sorry to say we're used to it, really, but yeah.
It's been a few years.
Okay, Grayson.
Look, I agree with Graham for largely the same reasons. You know, we've seen stuff that we built here, you know, in the duplex housing space 7 years ago, double. I think it's going to do that again quite easily. And again, you know, if I look back 7 years, we didn't have a lot of the constraints and issues that we have now, like Graham mentioned, around infrastructure of sewers, waters, the flood mapping, limiting the amount of developable sites that are out there. All of those constraints weren't around 7 or 8 years ago. They are now, which means land's going up. Hamilton City Council's increasing their DCs by ridiculous levels. That's development contribution, sorry, by ridiculous levels. Again, all of that is putting upward pressure on housing, and that's before we even get to interest rates dropping. So in my mind, there's only one way that property values can go, and it has to be up. You literally can't build houses for as cheap as people are buying them now. So it's only got to go one way.
Yeah. And Darren, the thing for you as well is that here's the development of yours that's 2.5 years away. So when I'm asking for a prediction from you, let's look at 2.5 years.
Well, look, I mean, I'm not going to tell you what prices will be like in 2.5 years. I can tell you I think they'll be a lot higher than they are now. Someone once said to me, the best time to buy property was yesterday. And if you go back 10 years ago, if you have a look at the price of property, if you could go buy a property 10 years ago, you'd be looking at those numbers going, wow, I'm going to buy everything I can. And that same chap said, well, the second best time to buy property is today.
Yeah.
And, this is where we are. It's property doesn't generally go back in price. Sometimes, as we've seen over the last year or two, it does dip a little bit back. But at the end of the day, you've still got underlying pressures that keep prices up. You've got cost of land, you've got cost of building is still going up, even though inflation is reducing. It doesn't mean the prices are going down. It just means that the rate at which they go up is slowing. You've got more and more council government regulations that keep coming into effect. That just adds cost. So everything that you look at, all your cost inputs in developing and building are going up, which means that property prices can't go back. They're going to have to keep going up with those costs. So, yeah, I mean, a good rule of thumb in property is that prices typically double over 7 to 8 years. If you're using 12 years in your cash flows, Nikki, that's being very conservative. We've seen our apartment developments at Sugar Tree that we did 10 years ago certainly doubled over that period of time. So, it's certainly higher and not coming back for all the multitude of reasons that we've talked about tonight.
No, well, thank you. Our hour is up, and it's always so good to have this sort of conversation with reasonably intelligent men that have got well, men with a lot of experience, let me put it that way. Thank you so much for your time. I didn't see any questions come up, which means that you've done particularly well. We'll put this, we'll send this out, this webinar, to interested people and those that missed out, because it is really worthwhile. Darren, Graham, Grayson, thank you so much for your time tonight, and
Anytime, Nikki.
I look forward to speaking to you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
See you guys.
So there you have it. Now, if you would like to talk to us, remember it's a one-on-one conversation with a senior consultant. There's no cost for that. We put together a strategy document and we identify the right sort of properties that are going to work for you and your personal situation and what you want to achieve. It's no obligation. And I really look forward to you coming through and experiencing the Propeller Way. So thank you very much for your time. You can call us on free phone 0800 81 81 91 or go to info@propellerproperties.co.nz. Thank you so much and have a great night.